got a chance to see Bob Marley, One Love. Find out my thoughts right now. All right, welcome back to the channel, everyone. Thank you so much for spending time with me and my tirades about movies and television and comics and board games and all the stuff that I love. So, we're going to talk about Bob Marley, One Love. But before we do, make sure to like and subscribe. I am trying to grow the channel. My name is Frank Zenka. I'm an award-winning screenwriter, novelist, and comic book writer. If you want to check out some of the stuff I've written, not only is it on Amazon, but I have late pledge for my Vampire Mob comic set in 1950s. We did get it fully funded through Kickstarter. However, if you missed it, now's the perfect time to get in. I have about 10 more pages to get done. And of course, if I could get some help with that, that would be amazing. But yeah, it's an awesome story, but we'll talk about more about it at the end of this video. Let's jump right back into One Love. So I am not a fan of reggae music. It's just not my thing. In fact, I'm not a fan of most music. I write to soundtracks. That's the majority of what I listen to. This. Following Bob Marley, of course, I was alive at the height of his career from 1978 to 1981. So I was, of course, I was like 10. I don't know. Yeah. So, but I was, 12, 13 years old, by the time he had died in 1981. But I knew very little about him or his career or anything. I really didn't follow it. Even at, that young an age, unless I was a big fan of something, I didn't really follow anybody's career. Maybe George Lucas at that time, because I was a big Star Wars fan. But yeah, so I was interested to see this story because every story we see about music personalities, like we did one about Queen, I forgot what else was, had come out about it, the biopics that have come out about bands. But Elton John, there's been a ton of them, and they all end exactly the same way. We find, someone, it's all got the same plot beat points, where you start out with somebody that has a dream, they're coming from nothing, they have a talent, they get very famous, they have a group together of all these friends, and then they implode on one another. They start taking drugs. They start doing this, and they turn on one another. They become enemies to the point where their success falls apart. I mean, that is pretty much every band biopic that I've ever seen. But I knew for a fact that this one was different. That Bob Marley was not a person that imploded. And I can't even name one scene where they were not smoking weed throughout this entire movie. This entire 2-hour movie, there's every scene they're pretty much smoking weed. I think the only times is when the kids are around. That's about the extent of it. But I was pretty surprised at that there was always weed and everything. Now, even though I'm not a fan of the music, I understand the talent that is there. And I have, even when I left the theater, I had a tune in my head and stuff to that effect. The acting in it is stellar. I mean, stellar. The guy who plays Bob Marley, and this was executive produced by the whole Marley family. So I don't know if they went to, their friends, relatives, whatever, and got the money for this, but the entire Bob Marley, in fact, one of the Marley family, I don't know who it was also like the sound editor or the music editor. So there was obviously a whole group that got together to make this film. I'm sure it was a labor of love, because they were looking to honor their father and or whatever family member, because they weren't all kids. But the reason I say father is because at the beginning of the film, pre-credits, Ziggy Marley comes out and says that we're very happy with this and thank you guys all for supporting it, which I thought was pretty interesting because we don't really get to see that very often. So Kingsley Ben-Adir, he is the one who plays Bob Marley, and he really submerges himself into the role. There was an old show on Netflix called OA or OA. So I did watch that movie, and I don't remember him specifically. He's also in Peaky Blinders. Don't remember him there either. He was also one of the Kens. Don't remember them there either. I literally cannot remember him in any of the roles. He was in Secret Invasion. I didn't see that one. He played Malcolm X in One Night in Miami. That I did see the trailer to. I didn't see the actual movie. And he is a chameleon type of actor who just disappears in a role where you can't even recognize him anymore, which is great. I love actors like that. I love actors that can literally not be themselves any longer and disappear into a role. And in this, I mean, he took on the accent. I mean, part of the problem with the film is, of course, the accent, where even like the music producer in the one playing the role of the music producer in the film says, "What? I understand what you said." So us as audience members, there's some stuff that flew past me too that I had no idea what they had just said. So the writing on it, and of course Lashana, I forgot Lashana's last name, but she was in Woman King. She was in the last James Bond film. She's been in a lot of things. She was in Captain Marvel, and then she played Captain Marvel in Doctor Strange number 2. But Shauna Lynch. So she usually comes off like, I really have a problem with her in Captain Marvel, but I did have a problem with her in Doctor Strange 2. I had a problem with her in Bond. I had a problem with her in Woman King because she just comes off, when she turns on this, I'm trying to figure out the word I want to use without being offensive. When she turns on the girl boss, she becomes extremely unlikable as a character. So in Woman King, she was able to turn it on and off, and she also sacrifices herself pretty much at the end. So I liked her character, but there were certain points in there where she annoyed me, and so I didn't like her in Bond at all. I mean, that was her entire character was there to be abrasive, I think. But in here, she wasn't. She was here to show love and affection, but also to be the strong woman. And I think that she was able to walk that line, which I was pretty happy with. So this is one of her stronger roles. And I thought that the guy who played the marketing guy was from Vampire Diaries, but maybe he's not. He looked like the guy from the Vampire Diaries, but I guess he's not. Yeah, so James Norton. I have to look him up a little bit further, because I thought he was, but apparently I misremembered that. So the writers on this, there was 3 writers. One guy has written nothing. He's more of a producer, so I'm not even gonna discount him completely. But Terrence Winter. The director was the same director that did Robert the King or whatever, King Richard. And the other writer did Sopranos, Wolf of Wall Street, Boardwalk Empire, Tulsa King. The guy can write, man. I mean, he's got some huge, probably some major awards behind him. But the other guy was the writer of King Richard. So that's why he brought him on. They probably hired the director first, and then they hired this guy's name is Zach Balin. So they probably hired him on second, and the other director, the director probably brought him on. So he's written Creed 3. He's only written like 3 movies: Gran Turismo, Creed 3, and now this, and King Richards. That's 4. So yeah, apparently they have some kind of relationship. So I think the biggest problem with this, because I think the director was able to get this thing to flow, and I think this was the problem with directing too. So maybe I kind of take that back, because there is some directing problems, and there is some writing problems here. So he constantly goes back in time, but we really don't have a cut of it. He just goes back in time to when he was a kid. And then there's also this other group of scenes that's like not a flashback. It's not. I don't think it's reality. You guys can tell me if I'm wrong, but it's more of a vision for him. It's more of symbolism of, I guess, what he thought his father was like. Although the guy who leaves the house in that uniform, he says his father was white, but the guy that ends up being, that looks like his father, is black, which we find later. And I'm not going to do any spoilers. That's not really a spoiler. But I was totally confused by all of that. And then when he gets his house shot up and he goes and does the concert right after, first of all, his wife is shot, and they said he just barely missed her brain, which I don't understand, because literally you see the gun point right at her head, and she gets shot, but yet she makes it right to the concert, and I'm totally confused by that too. She signs herself out of the hospital, even though she was shot in the head. I was totally confused by any of that. So I was confused by that. I was confused by the concert, because we see the guy that shot him in the audience pointing a gun, and I don't know if that was just a vision of his, or if it was real, because they never tell us. But yet he stops the concert right after and goes and basically tells his wife to leave with the kids. So I was confused by that. I was confused sometimes about where we were when we got back to when he was a child, and because it was all just kind of jumbled together. And then he has a fight with his friend who he thinks is stealing money, but we don't ever find out if he really was, what the deal was. We never see him again. So we don't ever find out what the repercussions of that was or anything. It just kind of falls to the wayside. And then there's this whole build-up of him wanting to do these series of appearances in Africa, and he never goes to Africa in the entire movie. The only thing that we see is a line at the end of the movie in the text. That's it. So there's a lot of problems here with the way this thing's told, but the acting and the relationship between the characters and the conflicts that he has, not only internally but externally, keep the story moving so that you don't feel bored. But there was a lot of times it was just like, huh? I don't get it. I don't understand. So if you have any answers to all of those problems that I brought up, let me know, because like I said, I was confused by quite a bit of it when we disconnected from the biopic side. And I've seen some other reviews where it says we don't really delve into his character much, or the character of Bob Marley in general. And I tend to agree with that on a lower thing. I think I got to know him as a person. Now, how close that was to the real person, I don't know. But as a character, I did feel like I got to know him. But I think that there was a lot more to shed a light on that he shied away from as a writer or as a group of writers and as a director. So this is a far than better than average film, I think. Even though I'm not a fan of reggae, I was very touched by the film and by the person that Bob Marley was and what he stood for, and the fact that he had stood against this adversity. And it's funny because they talk about there's two different political people in Jamaica, and the Jamaica was so divided by this political atmosphere happening inside the country that it turned into just about civil war. And it's very interesting that it's how I kind of feel about America right now, that we are so divided that we're already on the brink of civil war, as in some cases, I think. I was watching something today where the guy wanted to release some information about the police, and some people didn't, and in his circles didn't like it, what he was going to release, so they threatened his life to the point where he had to have round the clock police escort. So yeah, we're on the point of a lot of violence, and I see a lot of that in how they set up Jamaica in this. So it's interesting. So it's also interesting that how he came up with. So we see a little bit of how he came up with the music, and he took Exodus from a movie where they were listening to the movie soundtrack, and he's like, "What is that?" And also, his wife accuses him of cheating, and he accuses her of cheating. And I guess he was, because that conversation does not go in his direction, but we never see it. We never see any of that. So again, there was a lot of problems. Now, if that was in the original script and they cut it out, or the director didn't want to show it because it showed him in a negative light. But these are the things why we watch biopics, is because we want to see the stuff that was hidden. And he's been dead since '81. I think I think that the time limit has been lifted at this point, where he doesn't have to be or look like a saint. It's better off that we see all of the imperfections at this point. They did the same thing with Dr. Martin Luther King, where they showed some of his infidelities and stuff to that effect. I don't think it changed the way that we feel about him as a leader. So I don't think it would have, affected anything on this side as well. I don't know if they just ran out of time and or they just wanted to not show anything negative. Because that scene, there's only 2 scenes that are negative in the entire film that show him kind of going a little bit off the deep end, but that's it. But obviously he was well loved by not only the people, but by his family, and he never broke off from his band, he did die at 36 years old, so I guess he really didn't have the time to really get older or anything to that effect. But most of the time in these bands that they cut their band loose, they try to go off on their own. This never happens there. In fact, I don't know if it was Lionel Richie. There was some person that they brought in, his guitarist, and he became part of that band. I forgot what singer that he was a part of that other band before he got part of the Bob Marley. But that was very interesting too. So anyway, yeah, it was a decent movie. I think it could have been more. That's my problem with it, is that it could have been more and there was a lot of jagged edges to it that could have been cleaned up. So it's for me, it's a 7. It is above average. It's not great. Aside from some of the performances, I think that Lashana Lynch wore some kind of a big suit underneath her dress because her hips look very wide in comparison to the other films that she'd been in. So I think she's wearing something, because she wears these long dresses continuously. And it didn't look like her body at all. It's interesting. Anyway, that's it for me. Let me know what you guys thought of the film. Did you see it? Did you want to see it? And if you did, did it meet your expectations? All right, and remember to give me a like and subscribe. Please ring the bell. Give me a thumbs up. Give me a middle finger, whatever. Remember, too, that Lords of L.A., which is my vampire mob set in 1950s Hollywood with Marilyn Monroe as a guest star. But we have, it's definitely mature. It's got, so don't buy it for your kid. But it has definitely a lot of sex, blood, violence, gore, all the stuff that you'd want in a vampire comic book, including a love triangle and everything else. So it's interesting. Or it's actually more of a triangle, more of a square, I guess, because there's 3 guys involved in this one. But anyway, check it out in the link below. It's on Fund My Comic, and so definitely check that out. Also, I am changing my name of the card game that Mark Spears and I are working on, the Classic Monsters. Originally, I called it Riftstorm, but somebody brought up that there was a Riftstorm video game that just got released in last year, which I didn't know about. And I've been working on this thing for 2-3 years now. So I think I'm going to call it Storm Rivals. Let me know what you guys think of that. All right, check out some of my other videos that'll pop up here at the end, and I will see you guys on the next one. All right, bye-bye.